Okay, so what's your first question, Michael? And I guess this is
So
based
like
on some of the videos you've watched. I'm assuming.
Sort of. I mean, based on like your stuff and Leo's, but like, so if we created all of this just for our own amusement, right? Then what is the point of enlightenment beyond amusement?
Beyond
so like
amusement? What's the point of enlightenment beyond amusement?
Well, I'm just saying like so we're in this dream or whatever you want to call it. So why not just enjoy the dream? Like, instead of like meditating 2 hours a day, to realize, you know, that you're God, because you kind of created all of this duality to get away from that, right?
Well, in the sense.
You're supposed to just like enjoy this experience, right? Or
no, not
like,
necessarily.
Okay.
It's everything. You're meant to enjoy it, not enjoy it. You're meant to suffer, not suffer. You're meant to have pleasure, not have pleasure. You're meant to all that stuff. You're meant to have misery, depending on your genetic makeup, circumstance. All that is part of it. So it's not, the enjoyment is not for you, the relative self per se, even though there are moments when we have enjoyment. The enjoyment, if you want to even call it that, is for the ultimate self. And we think it's tricky because it's not like we are doing it. It's not like there's a collective and the collective is saying, let's create this reality. The standpoint I'm speaking of, there is no collective. It's just a unity. But the unity is so grand and so broad and so expansive. I'm only using we. I use the term we to show that God is everything, which includes everything that we are. And all we're doing is, quote unquote, playing the role as human beings, or playing the role as a rock, or playing the role as a tree, playing the role as gases, planets, solar systems, microscopic organisms, whatever the case is. It's just one of the things that God is doing is playing human beings. So it's not like we're having a collective and so let's create this experience where we have this amazing or terrible dream. You know what I'm saying? Because from God's standpoint, it's like the ultimate singularity. We is part of the we, or the us, or the crowd, or the multitude is the illusion, so to speak. But because there's no words to describe it, I say we are God. We are the creator. We are the manifester of all things. But it's not like there's a group of people saying, let's create this magical thing. God is not even saying that either. That's not even how it works. God is not saying, I'm going to create a universe. No. I may say that just to make it easier for people to understand, but God has always been manifesting a universe. There's no beginning to that. And as I say that, that's not 100% true either. Right now, as we speak, the universe is dying and giving birth to itself. Right now, as we speak. Right. So as the universe is manifesting new things in the physical realm, on the other end of that, that's the Big Bang. On the other end of that is the Big Boom, and it's destroying itself. And it's happening right now. It's always been doing that. So the universe is dying and birthing itself throughout eternity. That you can call that the physical aspect of quote unquote God. God's having that dream. But we only use terms like things like dream and things of that sort. God is not really necessarily having a dream. We just use these analogies to try to paint some kind of a simple picture. God is just being God, right? And that includes, quote unquote, what we're doing here in this reality, which is one reality out of many. But all realities they collapse into one whole grand reality. And if you have the experience of the one whole collapsing of this one reality, you experience yourself as the ground of all being. So in a sense, God is not creating anything at the highest level anyway. At the causal level, God is manifesting the universe into existence. That's true. At the non-dual level, the creation and the destruction and the neutral of the two are all exactly the same. But because people can't comprehend that, I just say God is having a dream. But that's not 100% true. Go ahead, Nathan.
As you mentioned before, so God is constantly creating itself and killing itself at the same time.
Well, the physical aspect of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, the physical aspect. I think Michael just walked away. He said, fuck this. It's like, I'm going back to my cult. Fuck that. But Nathan had something to say. He wanted you to hear it, or maybe the question was towards you. I'm not sure.
Just a question. So you said universe or God is constantly creating itself and killing itself at the same time. So
the physical aspect of God,
yeah.
Manifestation of God is, yeah.
So is he like he or she or what? I don't know if he's gender fluid.
Yeah, you can say they or them.
They, them, him, whatever.
Him, her, him, he, and she, her. All of that is true.
Yeah.
God is playing all those roles. Yeah.
Is he or she in constant pain, like constantly? Like, just imagine like being birthed and dying at the same time. That's gotta be like painful all the time.
The short answer to your question is yes. The physical aspect of God is going through enormous pain, yet at the same time is having the ultimate pleasure. So that is true. So from the physical level, from the emotional level, well, I guess in this case, the physical level, God is feeling the ultimate pain and suffering. That is true. And on the mental level, God is going through the worst mental states, yet at the same time is going through the most magnificent, I don't know, I can't even find the word right now, experience of his life, most blissful experience of its existence. So both are happening at the same time. But remember, the presence and existence of God is non-dual and beyond. So feeling pain and pleasure at the same time has its own distinct feeling. It's not like you're feeling all pain and no pleasure. You're feeling both simultaneously, and that's what God is doing. The best way I can say it in human terms. So God is feeling all emotions, all mental disorders, and all mental stability. God is experiencing all form of pain, yet at the same time all form of pleasure. God is experiencing the whole range of intellect. God is explaining the whole range of everything below the intellect, like whatever you want to call that. All of that God is experiencing simultaneously right now in this moment. And so when the person reaches the moment of enlightenment, you experience that too.
Huh.
All this stuff is a lot to take in because we break up everything. Everything is either hot or cold, black or white, good or bad. What I'm trying to explain here, when God is living out his existence, all of that is experienced simultaneously. Everything that could possibly be felt, God's experiencing that right now. All right. Every event that's ever happened, that has happened, is happening right now and will happen. God is experiencing that right now. Because from God's standpoint, past, present, and future is exactly the same. Yet at the same time, because God is so powerful, there is a past, there is a future, and there is a present, and there is a future. God is doing all those things right now. That's why the moment of enlightenment, when the human being experiences enlightenment, the human being is just experiencing God. All of that is being felt. So you experience past, present, and future. You experience all pain and suffering and all pleasure. You experience all bliss. You experience all events. You experience all situations. You experience all human beings, all animals, all reptiles, all insects, all microscopic beings, all viruses, everything all the way down to subatomic particles, all the way down to vibrating strings, all the way up to planets, solar systems, galaxies, multiverses, everything. But it's doing it simultaneously. It's all being experienced right now. Past, present, future collapse into this one whole moment of experience. But God also has the ability to break things up. to experience things in the moment as you're experiencing things right now. You're having your experience, I'm having my subjective experience, and Michael's having his subjective experience. God also has the ability to experience life from that standpoint as well. So all of that is also happening.
So he's experiencing my poor ghetto life. Is that?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and everything you just said is manifested by God. Yeah, God is having that experience because it chooses to. God just wants to have every possible experience that it could possibly explore, because it knows at the end of the day it can't die. So he can forget that it's God, because it's forgetting that it's God, but it also remembers that it's God because it's doing both. Because remember, everything's happening simultaneously. So it chooses to have the experience of being Michael, being Nathan, and being Morgan, but not just being us. As I said before in the other interview, in the other conversation that we had, is also experiencing being the headphones, being the bed, being the air that you're breathing in and out, being the hair in your nose, being your eyebrows, being the stuff on your table, being the boxes. Well, but when I say the boxes, I mean the stuff that makes up what the box is, because everything is consciousness. Yeah. So right now you're experiencing God from an abstract point of view. So that's why you can't see it, because everything for you, because God is everything, but you're experiencing from an abstract point of view. So what you see is boxes and plates and tables and a bed or a sofa bed, whatever the case is, and just other stuff. There's you and other. God is having the human experience of the subjective person, the subjective individual, and other. And as it's being other, if other is a sentient being, it's experiencing life from its subjective experience viewing other. That's right. So all of that is happening. This is why I want other people to understand why this thing is so magnificent. Because when you have the experience of having that such of awakening, all of that is shared with you, because you're always been that. You're just having the experience of being Nathan, who has a subjective mind viewing the world from an objective point of view. But at the moment of enlightenment, all that goes away. Your subjective mind goes away. The objective, the other, goes away. They both collapse into one thing. So subjective becomes objective. Intersubjective is also included in that, and interobjective is also included in that. So all four collapse together, and then you have the ultimate experience of experiencing existence as it is. But not only are you experiencing existence, you're also experiencing non-existence at the same time. All of that is happening simultaneously, and it's happening right now. You actually never left it. You're just having the experience that you never experienced it, or that you've left it, or whatever the case is. But you're in it right now. But you're having the experience as Nathan.
Yeah. Like, is there is that kind of paradox, like why? I mean, maybe the question doesn't make sense, but like why there is such a thing as God, because you exist and don't exist at the same time? Or this is like...
Okay, keep going. I was just going to cut it, but no, keep going.
Well, you talked with Gabriel about trans-rational and...
Pre-rational, rational, trans-rational.
Right, so like, you know, to exist and not exist at the same time is, I guess, like trans-rational.
That's a trans-rational experience, yeah.
Right, so is that kind of trans-rational property of God, like why there is such a thing? Or does it even make sense to ask the question?
Yeah, it's only because I don't understand the question. Not that last part anyway. Say that part again. Is it God?
Okay, so God is this being that is all powerful, at least in the context of its own consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But why is there such a thing?
Why? I would never have the answer to why. I've given answers to that before, which is it really goes back to God has the power to do it all. Because the reason why God does it, and I'm saying this from a human perspective, God is the only thing that exists. There's no one for God to hang out with. There's no one for God to communicate with. God is just God. God is actually the wrong term, because it has no labels either. It's beyond all labels. But we're using labels only because we're talking about something in the third person, right? But it has no labels. It's not even a God. It's we're just using that to represent the all-powerful thing. It's not a being. It has no shape. It has no form. You can't see it. It doesn't see itself. It doesn't. It has no mass. It's none of those things. Yet at the same time, it's all those things, because being, presence, mass, matter. What I'm saying is all that stuff is the same thing, but we're having the experience of it being in different parts. So we're making distinctions between matter and gas and all that type of stuff. But from that experience, which is called absolute monism, all the stuff that exists in the universe and beyond is the same thing. So God is the only thing that exists. So it's not like there's a need for a God. God is what exists. Everything that's happening outside of God or within God is God. It's the manifestation of God, which is us having the conversation and asking the question, why does God have the need to do such a thing? That's God doing that. Because that's what it would do if it's all knowledgeable, all powerful, all knowing, omnipresent. So you got to think about God is just playing the opposite of itself. Because you can use the term fun, but it's not what it actually is. It just does that because it's the only thing that exists. So being the only thing that exists, it creates everything in the being because it has the power to do so. And the reason why I don't want to say it's why is God doing it? Because it's also beyond time. It's beyond time, and it's within and beyond time. So it takes time for things to create. It takes time for things to manifest. So we understand time, at least from a linear standpoint. From God's standpoint, he's experiencing, or it's experiencing, linear time through us, because we're the ones that understand. We've been designed to comprehend linear time. So God is doing that as well, but it's not the only form of time. There's many types of time, and God is playing the role and experiencing all those forms of time as well. So all those things are happening as we speak.
So is causality, is that something that exists just within the time, which is something that's created?
That happens within time. So that happens on the causal level of consciousness.
So there is actually no causality.
There is. See, this is where it gets tricky. There is on the causal level, because there's also different levels, and all these levels also exist, right? But at the ultimate level, causality and all that stuff collapses into the absolute. So from that standpoint, because remember the way how we're thinking and comprehend, we have to break things up. So I'm just saying it from that standpoint. At that level, there is no causality, right? But there is. It's just I'm trying to collapse everything. So causality is part of the absolutes. So just saying God is, just take away the word God and just call it absolute. When I say absolute, I really mean absolute. God is absolutely, or absolute is absolutely everything. Any thought that you have, whether it's for God or against God, that's God doing it. Atheism, that's God doing it. Theism, that's God doing it. Pantheism, that's God doing it. But in this case, through the manifestation of a human being who is designed to have those type of thoughts, or to have critical thinking, to create philosophy, to create mathematics, to create religion, to create all those things, to create cults. It doesn't matter what it is. Trees, human beings are the ones that are capable, at least on this planet, to do that. But there's other animals and different things and other creatures who have other different abilities that God is experiencing through that as well. So if you take the word God, take away the word God, just call it the absolute. And when I say absolute, I mean this literally, absolute, absolutely, absolutely, absolute. Everything that's possible, impossible, probable, and improbable.
So like there's a lot of stuff that happens, that is improbable, that say I could have, I walked home from work today, so I could have gotten hit by a car. I didn't get hit by a car.
Mm-hmm.
But does God experience me getting hit by a car? Because like that was one possible branch. Now my consciousness is stuck on a particular realization of events, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is God experiencing all of those branching possibilities, so that I both got hit by a car and I didn't get hit by a car today? I just happen to be on like one track.
The short answer is yes.
It sounds like Doctor Strange.
What's the long answer?
The long answer, I wouldn't be able to say in words. All right, but everything that you feel and could possibly feel that didn't happen in this string of reality, that could happen in other strings of reality, God is experiencing those as well. Alternate, I guess that would be alternate realities. God is experiencing alternate realities. If alternate realities isn't a real thing, then God's experiencing it as an imagination or as a creative concept, because those are real too. It doesn't mean the creative concept plays out in real life, but if you're able to produce a creative concept, God's experiencing that creative concept.
So how do we think about the concept?
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, not only is he experiencing the creative concept to the person who's thinking of the concept, it's also the concept itself. The thought of the concept is also God. God is not just a noun. It's also a verb. It's an adverb. It's an adjective. It's all those things as well. That anything that could be created out of a human being, God is also playing the role of that as the thing that's coming out of your mouth, or thing that's when the neurons and the synapses and the dendrites do what it does in the brain. God's experiencing all that as well, because God is every single part that makes up who you are as a human being.
So what is the impact of choice from a human context? Because like you, for example, I know after one of your awakening experiences, then you stopped eating meat, right?
Yeah, that was my first stream entry experience. Yeah.
But you're also still eating meat. You're just not, that's not this you in this reality, right? Like there is another you
who's still
eating meat.
Sure. Yeah.
It's still eating meat. And so like, what are the consequences of choice? Because it's almost like, you make that choice to not eat meat because, say, you don't want to you want to practice nonviolence or whatever your reason is for it, right? There's like a gazillion reasons.
This version of this reality, yeah.
That only affects this reality. So
no,
I mean,
all of them are, well, it depends how you look at it. Did I have a spiritual awakening in all the alternate realities? I don't know, because that was only stream entry. So I didn't have the experience of seeing all my other alternate realities, right? But if I only had that experience in this reality, and this reality I stopped eating meat, that's the case in this reality. But I do believe in alternate universes. So I do believe, like what we're just saying here, that there are other alternate universes where I probably did drink, where I probably did have a spiritual awakening and didn't stop eating meat. I'm not saying eating meat or not eating meat is a good or a bad thing. That's just something that was just a result that happened out of that awakening. I'm not saying because I stopped eating meat that it's now I'm being more closer to being moral. I'm not saying that. People are supposed to eat meat and people are not supposed to eat meat. Both are true. I have no judgment towards that. That's just a choice that I made in that after that experience. That happened naturally. That's just something that went away. There are other people who've had awakenings all the way to spiritual enlightenment who've never stopped eating meat.
I mean, why would you want to stop? It's like so great, you know?
Shut up.
So good. Oh, I just had some chicken. Oh gosh.
I lost the craving for it. The craving went away. I just didn't have a need for it anymore.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, naturally went away. I didn't have to do anything to try to force it. I didn't have to train myself. I didn't have to condition myself. It just naturally went away.
I don't think it did.
Oh yeah? The 10 years you've been hanging out, have you ever even seen me try eating meat?
I seen you sniff some.
Yeah, I sniff it all the time.
Gotta get a whiff.
Oh. Just let that burger. The only thing I like the smell of is bacon. Other than that, I don't really like the smell of meat anymore. But I still like the smell of bacon. But No, because I don't deny my feelings. I don't deny my feelings or the whatever thing. In my mind, I still like meat. I just haven't touched it for the last. I just never had a need for it, so I've never touched it. Right? There's no like this. There's no disowning for meat. It's just I don't feel a need for it anymore. But if someone asks me, "Do you love meat?" my answer would still be yes, because I'm not denying my feelings towards meat. Right? My how I experience things has broadened so much that liking the taste of meat is just one reality of the many within my bubble of reality. I just never choose to eat it. But if I'll admit, if I'm on an island and I'm starving to death and I see a kangaroo, I'm beating the hell out of that kangaroo, and I'm eating every bite of it, right, without guilt, because I need to survive.
You gotta fight the kangaroo. You gotta fight
the kangaroo.
You gotta box him.
To fight the kangaroo the first 50 times, I'm gonna win against that kangaroo because I need to eat, right? But I'm in an environment where I don't need it, so I don't have it. I'm not saying by any means that giving up meat is a sign of enlightenment. I don't believe it is. It's just something that happens within that process. That happens to some people, and other people that doesn't happen.
I was just asking, using that as an example of like, what is the impact of choice if all things are happening and being experienced anyway?
These are things that human beings create. From God's non-dual standpoint, choice doesn't mean anything. God is making all those choices. Remember, to create a choice takes time. Time needs to be involved for anyone to create a choice. God, at least from the highest level, is experiencing no time. So there are no choices being made. We live in linear time, and within linear time, choices have to be made. This gets really tough. There's things I'm not going to be able to explain because it has to be experienced. And there's people who can explain it better than me, but it has to be, the experience has to be experienced. Why this is a choice/choiceless thing. So all choices are happening. Choices are a result of cause and effect. It's the result of the Big Bang. Right, but the Big Bang is not the beginning of creation. The Big Bang is just one out of many manifestations. All right, the Big Bang has always been big. The Big Bang has always been banging. It's still banging right now. We're just moving away from it, which creates time. The Big Bang. Nathan's thinking something tantric right now.
Just banging away.
Just banging away. The greatest porn star. Just banging. Banging to the music of for eternity, right? It's just banging away. That's all it does. It just keeps banging. But we're moving away from it, and that's what creates time. And all the choices that are being made are the choices of the Big Bang. These are all the choices that it can make, which includes us.
Ron Jeremy is God. I mean, that's
Wow, chicka, wow. And I was about to say, I worked with Ron Jeremy, but everyone takes it wrong when he just walked away. Where's that guy? Where's it going?
Where'd it go?
Hear us, though. So
I live in this apartment that's not my apartment, but the phone rings and I never. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, that's all.
No idea who's calling.
No, I was going to say that I worked with Ron Jeremy once, but everybody thinks when I say that it was important. It's like, no, I worked with them on stage as a stand-up. I worked with him on stage, so I have to make it clear how I worked with Ron Jeremy. I worked with him years ago. We compared size together, like all that stuff, like whatever. No. We worked in the comedy club together once. It was called the Below the Belt show. He was the host, and we all had to do material in regards to like dick jokes and sex jokes and all that type of stuff. So yeah, that was a blast. Yeah, Ron Jeremy.
That was a blast, all right.
Yeah, but the Big Bang is banging away. It's always been banging. It's the ultimate porn star. That's what it does. The Big Bang itself is the Big Bang and the Big Boom, and it's both in metaphorically. Metaphorically, it's both the vagina and the penis simultaneously. As it unites, as it creates the cosmic it creates the cosmic yoga. You want to call yoga with a capital Y, And that's what keeps everything intact. That's what allows everything to manifest, all that stuff. So the cosmic, you can call that cosmic sex, if you want to use that as an analogy to explain the Big Bang and the Big Boom. That's from the causal level, not the ultimate level. At the ultimate level, nothing is happening. Everything is as it is, even time and space itself.
Like this conversation is just something that's stuck there and fixed.
You can say that. So from the ground of being standpoint, this part I can't explain, nor can I comprehend it in the moment. It's just happening. But in a sense, you can say happening takes time. For something to happen, it takes time. So we're talking about something that's beyond time, where the best thing I can say, nothing is happening. But the best thing I should say, the best term I should use is nothingness. Nothingness is happening, as opposed to nothing is happening. All right. But again, who can wrap their minds around that? Right. It's something you have to experience. When you experience the ground of all being, you realize that everything that's ever happened in the existence of all existence happens right now in this moment. It's happening right now in this moment, even though we may not be aware of it.
Is this nothingness?
Yes.
This is part of nothingness.
This is the manifestation of nothingness.
So, like, you hear, I don't know, like people like Lawrence Krauss or physicists talk about, like, how can there be a universe from nothing? And you're saying there actually, it is, the universe itself is nothing, is something that happens within nothingness.
Well, the universe, everything is nothingness, right? Nothingness just really means everything that is happening, everything that's not happening within the space right now. Nothingness can also mean that nothing can be referred to it. So how do you explain nothingness? I can't do it because there's nothing in our reality that I can refer to it. So it has many different meanings. But nothingness in the context that I'm using it in, nothingness just means it's the non-dual between everythingness and nothing happening at the same time. That's nothingness. It collapses. It's kind of like if you take two sounds and you play them. How does it work again? You know, when you play two sounds, it's two the same sounds, and you change the, if two sound waves are flowing in the same motion, it cancels each other out. That's what, if you know that the sound physics to that, you can say that's what.
Yeah. So they're like not, they're out of phase.
They're out of they're out of phase. So when two sounds are hitting each other out of phase, you hear nothing. Something is still happening, but you can't hear it. It's the same kind of thing when you have everythingness, when you have everything that manifests and nothing, when they collapse, I'm calling that, in this sense, nothingness. Because it's nothingness is non-dual. And non-dual is just the distinction, is the non-distinction between two things. Non-dual just means not two, one without a second. So in a sense, you can say the ultimate is the collapse of the two, but the ultimate is not only the collapse of the two; it's also its separate parts. So the ultimate is everything that's ever happened in existence. It's nothing because nothing has ever happened in existence, and it's the collapse of the two. So God is all three. It's the two extremes and everything in the middle. So it's the whole spectrum, and you can't exclude any of it. You have to include all of it together as one thing, as a singularity. That's where you get absolute monism from, in a sense.
So you have these polarities, but they, in some sense, cancel out, and they, at another level, are still nothingness.
Well, in the way I'm using it right now. So when the two cancel out, you get nothingness. But remember, I'm going backwards. Because remember I said you have the two extremes and the two cancel out? Take that and reverse that. You have the nothingness, and the nothingness is separating itself into two parts. So it's doing the opposite. It's doing
is the dual. Then we end up with duality.
And then you end up with duality. Yeah.
Existing in.
Yeah. Yeah, you end up with duality. And so as you're now living a life of this duality, the goal is God, in that standpoint, in this context, God is trying to find itself back to this non-dual presence of what it actually is. because it has time. If you want to go back to the causality, it has time to do that. Because time also exists. Right? I know many people say time doesn't exist. Both perspectives are true, because how we perceive time is not how time actually manifests itself. So that's true. But time does exist. So God's experiencing all that stuff happening within, in that sense, linear time. But there's other forms of time. But in this sense that we're talking about, linear time, that the three of us are experiencing right now. Yeah, what is it about Darshan?
Darshan. We meet him. We're gonna go see him on the 3rd, right, or something.
Yeah, on Saturday.
On the 3rd. I was like, it's Saturday. Okay, look. So like, should I like how should I look into his eyes? Should I look like in like the left side?
Well, he's gonna look into your eyes. Right? He's gonna look into your eyes, and he's gonna put his hand on top of your head. He's gonna look into your eyes, unless he chooses to do it differently. He may, because of COVID, they may do it in a way where you stand in front of him and he just looks into your eyes. That's a possibility too. But the first time when I went to see him in person, he puts his hand on your head and looks into your eyes. But I've watched videos of him where he's not touching the person at all. He's just looking at them directly into their eyes.
Is he gonna, did he, like when he did it, did he like judge you, or like did he just like look into your eyes?
I wouldn't know if he's judging me, but the saying is that he doesn't have any judgment. So when he looks at you, he can see all your sins, he can see all that stuff that's happening, he can see all your faults, all your weaknesses, your flaws and all that, but he's looking at that with non-judgment. So he just looks at you and gives you the blessing. He doesn't care what state you're in. His job is just to give you the blessing.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter what you are as a person. We're all guilty of stuff. You're human. That's just what we do. He's supposed to be doing that with non-judgment. And if he is judging you, who cares? He's not the first one to judge you. I judge you all the time. Such an asshole. I'm so sorry, Nathan, but I have to say it. I judge you all the time, brother.
Don't worry. I judge you too.
I know you do. I was big laugh. Yeah, is that what you make sure you're prepared for that? Eh? I'll be bringing my daughter, and okay. Kata will be coming with her kid, and her sister and her child as well. Patricia's supposed to be coming, and Anthony G is supposed to be coming.
Okay. All right. Because like I don't know.
There'll be a lot of people there. There'd be like 100. There'd be hundreds of people there. So.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You wait in line for a number of hours until you do darshan with him.
Okay. We'll see how that goes. All right.
Yeah, nothing's going to happen. He's not when he looks into your eyes and touches your head. You're not going to have a mystical experience or anything like that. Nothing's going to happen. You're just going to walk away. You'll see how that unfolds as you go about your day and go about your life.
You don't know that. What if?
Oh, really? That all happens later?
Like, it could happen later. It depends on the person. It depends on their path. It depends on what they desire. It depends on a lot of things. But it happens later. Like, I didn't have my experience after meeting him. I had my experience a few months later.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so it doesn't happen on the spot. But there are gurus.
Your experience.
Sorry, go ahead.
Your experience a few months later was how did you like attribute it to him, or?
That's just my assumption, because what happened to me.
Okay.
Yeah, but because what happened to me later, I've never experienced that in my life after all, because I've gone through like maybe 60 spiritual awakenings, like profound peak experience, spiritual awakening. What happened to me on that last day has never happened to me before ever. In the years, the years, how long I've been doing this for now? Almost 20 years. So at that time I was about 16 and a half years. What took place that day has never happened to me before.
Interesting.
Yeah. But it's an assumption. I could be wrong. It probably was just the timing and stuff like that. But based on what happened and what I know about gurus and what gurus are supposed to do, that just made sense to me. Because there has always been that argument, can you do it without a guru? And the answer is you can do it without a guru, because I've done it without a guru. But when you get touched by grace and you receive it from a guru, there's something that happens that's 1,000 times more greater than any spiritual experience a human being can ever have. I wish I could explain what happened on that day. I wish I could do it. And I wish I was able to compare it for others to see the difference between what happened on December 14th in comparison to all the other spiritual awakenings and peak experiences I've had throughout the years. What happened on the 14th, December 14th, 2019 is nothing. This guy laughs every time because I say the same every time. It transcended everything. Every spiritual experience I've ever had in my entire life, it transcended all of that and more. This was truly a pure of absolute monism on that day, which I've never experienced before like that in my life. And I've gone through many quote unquote non-dual experiences. This surpassed anything I've ever experienced. Like when I say I experienced past, present, and future simultaneously, all of that is true. That left me broken. And it took me 2 years, and I'm still healing from it. 2.5 years getting over that trauma. There's trauma that's involved after going through that experience. I'm experiencing some form of trauma in a positive way, though. All right, that followed after that period, and I'm still trying to get myself together and heal from that experience, because it was so dramatic. I can't explain to you how profound this thing was. Oh my gosh, it was just mind-blowing, heart-blowing, body-blowing. It was totally sublime. It was just the absolute. And it all happened 2 months after meeting this man. Yeah. And then many people who have mentioned that too, with people with him or people like him after having the experience. But there's some people, depending on the type of guru, they get it at the moment. So if it's a guru who's actually deliberately transmitting the non-dual presence to you, that can happen on the spot. But that wasn't the case for me, because he's giving darshan. He's not giving spiritual transmission, transmission, I should say. He's doing darshan. He's blessing you. So whatever it is that you want, he can help you receive that. That's the thing that I wanted. So that's where my intent lies. So after meeting him, that's what took place afterwards. But that took about 2 months. But within those 2 months, I was going through a lot of shaking and a lot of vibration in the body. A lot of different things were happening in the body. My body parts would move on its own. My head would twitch on its own. Just all this weird stuff was happening during that time period before the break actually happened.
And after all that, you still didn't give him $20 for his donation.
What do you mean? I gave him a donation.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Of course I did. I always give him a donation. What are you talking about? I've met with him now. How many times? 8 times now? I've always given him a donation. Maybe one time I didn't give a donation, but about 8 times now. Yeah. Once in person, the other ones were virtual. And I still sent a donation when I can. There's one time I didn't, though, for whatever reason. Forgive me. But yeah, but I most of the times I give a donation. Yeah, in British pounds too. So trust me, I think I'm doing a lot here. I'm doing the most.
Oh yeah. Here's £1 for you. £1 for you.
And 1 for Jesus. Yeah. So yeah, that's extraordinary. So I changed my tune. My thing is, if you're on a spiritual path, you should. My opinion is that you should have a guru or see a guru. It doesn't mean you have to follow the guru like from a disciple standpoint, but you should see a guru. And a lot of people think that you're hanging up with the guru to get knowledge. I'm not talking about knowledge here. I'm not talking about a guru teaching you more information. I'm talking about a guru who has the ability to be able for you to be touched by grace. Right? You can read knowledge from a book. You can get knowledge from any person who's speaking about it, whatever. But that is not important in comparison to what actually happens in the moment of non-dual suchness. Knowledge does not even compare. Intellect does not even compare. None of those things even compare to what I'm speaking of here. It has to be experienced, though. I cannot convey that through words.
I have a couple. I have a couple more questions.
Go for it. We got time. Well,
one is about just about Yinergy and like are you familiar with Robert Monroe?
Oh, of course. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So because he's kind of the guy that started this hemispheric synchronization stuff, right?
That's right.
So is Yinergy kind of based on that, or
it's based on the basics of it, using two sine
or
waves.
that basic concept?
The basic concept.
You've got two different frequencies, and your brain synchronizes to the net frequency.
Yeah.
I listened to your video that you posted the other day that was like 30 minutes of rain, but like really trippy rain. I thought
it's just regular rain, but
oh, it's trippy.
Is it?
It's trippy.
But it's not the rain that's trippy; it's the technology behind it.
You call it acid rain.
Okay, well, whatever. I had some kind of interesting experience. I'm curious because in an earlier video you referenced like multiple times this 2008 awakening.
Yeah.
And how the empty self has never left. So basically, if I understand correctly, like you had this experience and you became one with the empty self, or you connected with that in some way, and then that.
Okay. Well, I would say
basically
I would say the empty self came into the forefront, because the empty self in everyone is always there. But in the experience, the empty self came into the forefront, and my ego went into the background.
Okay. And the empty self is still there to some point, to some extent.
There right now.
Although you still have this ego that can like make fun of Nathan and stuff.
Yeah, because I have
the empty self make fun of Nathan.
The empty self is a witness. It watches everything that's happening. Right? Your ego doesn't go away. You can't kill the ego. Temporarily, You can get rid of the ego to have an experience, yes, but you can't get rid of your ego. Your ego's with you until the day you die.
It just changes form in different ways, becomes attached to different things, right?
That's what the ego does naturally, yeah. The goal is to become less attached to different things. Right? So now you're no longer a slave to the ego. You're now using the ego to your own liking, to some give or take. Like, ideally, you're using the ego to your own liking to have the ultimate experience as a human being.
Like after my spiritual awakening, then I became attached to spiritual things.
Yeah, from that standpoint, yeah, it found a new attachment. That's true. That's true. But you're letting go of other things that may be, that I can't speak for you directly, but you're now letting go of things that could be detrimental to you. Right? But that's just what the ego does. But yeah, the ego will always attach to something. Even Buddha talked about non-attachment, but even Buddha still has attachments. You can't get rid of attachments. Generally, you can't get rid of attachment. No human being has ever gotten rid of all their attachments. If you did that, you'd just be dead.
Isn't that the goal, though? Isn't that
the goal? Is to die? You're gonna die anyway.
Yeah, but like, isn't like well, yeah, but like, I'm just saying, like, isn't that like you? I remember one time we had a conversation. You're like, yeah, like meditation is like preparing for death. So we're just
that's true. You're preparing yourself for the day you die. Yeah. But when you're meditating, you're preparing yourself to have an ego death. But the ego death is not permanent. The ego death is temporary. So when you have the moment of non-dual suchness, temporarily you have an ego death. In that moment, there is no ego, but your ego comes back again after the experience is over. Because if you had no ego, you couldn't operate. You couldn't do anything without an ego. You need an ego. But when I say ego in this sense, I'm talking about sense of self. Your sense of self is the ego. That's what ego means. All the stuff that the ego does is the egoic stuff, the egotistical stuff, attachments, all that stuff is aspects of the ego. Right? But it doesn't mean that when you have an ego death and you come back, you're no longer egotistical. That comes back. Unless it's part of your makeup or your goal to get rid of the egotistical part for whatever the goal for you is supposed to be. So it's different for everyone.
I just gotta close the window. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. You're just ruining the shot. That's all. Keep doing what you're doing, buddy.
Ah.
Yeah. If that answers your question.
Excuse me. Jeez.
But your ego doesn't go away. People have the wrong idea, think that you're supposed to have an ego death and it goes away. You can't operate without an ego. You need an ego to be a human being. And if you're trying to get rid of the ego, that will never happen. But you can temporarily have an ego death. I don't know why Nathan's talking through the segment. He does this kind of stuff. Right? But you can't do anything without an actual ego. You need to have an ego. Ego's not a bad thing. Ego's a bad. No, he's singing. Ego's a bad thing when you can't control it. When it's controlling you, if you want to say it that way. When it's controlling you, when you're ending up in situations that you don't want, that type of stuff.
I've had a couple of times with like ayahuasca, temporary. And I think like something, even though it's temporary, some part of you does die in that experience.
Yes. Yeah.
It allows you to let go of something.
There are things that
of course,
that
you
do
come
change.
back.
Yeah. There are things that do change.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff probably won't. So me, like dropping meat, that's the ego letting go of that attachment. But the ego is not going to let go of all attachments. See what I mean? There is things that will change, because we have to remember that the ego is part of the psychological development. The ego is not part of the enlightenment. It's not part of the waking states of consciousness. So you have your psychological development where your job is to develop your ego, right? Because that's why the ego is a good thing. The reason why, when we talk about people not having good egos, is because we're talking about an ego that's not fully developed, right? So the goal is to develop your ego. So that's the psychological development that has like 8, 9 stages. And then you have and then from the awakening standpoint, you have your horizontal states of consciousness. And so it starts off from waking, like our waking state, dreaming, or dreaming state when you're sleeping, the non-dreaming state where you're sleeping but you're not dreaming, and then into non-duality. Then you have the witnessing stage, the empty witness, and then you have non-duality. So you have waking, sleeping, non-dreamless sleep, Turiya, which is the empty witness. It's called Turiya, and then Turiyatitta, which is the non-dual suchness. So there's 5 different states. So within the horizontal line of states of consciousness, the ego can temporarily die, right? And you have the experience of non-dual suchness all the way into non-dual suchness, right? When the ego dies totally. Then you come back again. And then you come back again at the stage that you're at. So if you're at stage 3 in the psychological stage of development, you come back to stage 3. But of course, because you had the experience, over time, you may jump up because of the experience that you previously had, where you start to let go of certain attachments. And you keep doing this all the way up to the psychological stages of development. But in your lifetime as a human being, you will not let go of every attachment that's attached to your ego. You won't be able to do that. And your body's, in your mind, your psychological self is not meant to do that. Because if you let go of all attachments, you wouldn't be wearing any clothes, you wouldn't eat, you would starve to death. You wouldn't care if it's hot or cold. None of those things would matter, and you would just end up dying. And that's not how the mechanism is designed. But you can get to a point where these things don't become a hindrance to you, right? I don't like extreme heat. That's never going to change. But I've accepted the fact that I don't like extreme heat. That's the difference. That's what's different about the ego. The ego still goes through all the different things that it goes through, but it learns to accept. It learns to accept the thing that it found very challenging. So the empty self just learns to accept the things that I don't like in life. Like I was talking to someone 2 days ago, and I said to her, "This is Tanisha, Nathan," and she goes, "I hope you're having a good day," and blah 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 blah. I'm like, yeah. I'm just here. I'm bored to death. And she hits me back, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope you're able to make your day a great and meaningful one." And I'm like, people always mistake when I say that. People always think that I'm suffering in my boredom. It's like, no. I'm just letting you know that I'm bored. I've accepted the boredom. I'm just now living out the boredom. So there's a part of me that's watching the boredom happen as the relative self goes through the boredom. right? But people are not going to get that if you haven't experienced the empty self that's watching everything happening in within its own existence. All right. So the empty self is watching myself going through boredom. I personally don't like the feeling of boredom, but the empty self doesn't care about that. It's amused by that, if you want to say from that standpoint, and it watches it happen. So as you start to split between the relative self and the empty witness, you become more of the empty witness, watching the relative self go through human experiences. And this is hard for people to understand unless they start experiencing it for themselves. So that's the difference when a person comes back. That's one of the differences when a person comes back into their ego. You're now not as attached to the ego, to this relative self that is accompanied by the ego.
I mean, I guess I experienced this to some degree, at least insofar as like, there's something watching my thoughts. And
Okay.
sometimes I get amused or I start laughing because I'm like, I'm just at how ridiculous I am, or, you know, I'll say something to somebody and then like absolutely contradict myself, like in some way that I act like 5 minutes later, and I'm just like,
So you get it.
Yeah, Morgan does that all the time. No.
Or just like getting.
And I'm the asshole.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Michael. Don't mind this guy. This freaking clown.
But it's a subtle thing, right?
Yeah.
Or is it not?
It's a subtle thing. It's very subtle, but it's even though it's very subtle, it becomes very apparent of what's happening. And sometimes you don't really notice it until you're talking to somebody else. And then, you know, and he's like, again, yeah, I'm really bored right now. I'm bored to death. Oh gosh, I hope your day goes okay. My day is okay. I'm just bored. I'm amused by my own boredom. I'm experiencing boredom in this moment. You know, it's not a bad or good thing. It's just what the empty self is experiencing in this moment. And it will pass. It's a temporary thing. It will pass. And another experience will happen. It comes and it haunts you and it goes away. Next thing comes, it haunts you and it goes away. And our whole lives are like that. Some things are really high and up, peak experiences, happiness, stimulation, sexual orgasm, whatever the case is, but they don't last. They're temporary and they go away. Next thing comes. And the empty self just watches it all happen, because the empty self knows that it's the manifestation of that. Or that thing is the manifestation of the empty witness. The empty witness, divinity, witnesses its own divinity as it's all happening. So you get to the point where you have this wide range, because every time you have like a peak experience, maybe not every time you have a peak experience, but every time you have a spiritual awakening, your vessel of consciousness opens up even more, and it welcomes in more spectrum of experiences, and it also welcomes the high definition of experiences. Most people have experiences like any one of us, but I don't believe that they're witnessing these experiences in high definition, right? But when you become more awake and more aware, you start to experience these things in high definition, whether it's boredom, happiness, depression, whatever the case is. Even I can be depressed, and the empty witness is watching depression happen. Again, I haven't been depressed I have never experienced depression for the last 12 years. But at the time, I remember going through a 3-day depression, and my inner self, the witness, just watched it happen. And so did you suffer from the depression? No, I just witnessed it. I experienced it, right? I just watched it happen. It was painful as hell, but I just watched it happen, and it went away.
Because you know, at that point, everything is temporary, and it's just all of these things coming and going. So this experience comes, and you experience it, and then it leaves, and then that's it. Then
and another thing
something else comes, and you're like, oh, I like this better.
Yeah.
And that goes.
And that goes. Yeah. and all that, right? And after years later, which would go back 7 years ago, I experienced on many times chronic fatigue, like terrible chronic fatigue. And I still had to find myself to go to work. I got up and went to work anyway, but the fatigue was like just insane. Like I'm talking about fatigue for 5 weeks. And this happened a number of times. And each time I've gone through it, as much as I don't like it, I've gone through it, and the empty self just watches it. It's like, oh, Morgan is going through chronic fatigue right now, but it will pass. Right? And I'm sure I'm going to have more episodes of this chronic fatigue, right? Because it's part of the Kundalini. It's part of the Kundalini process, right? So it happens. It's supposed to happen. There's nothing I can really do. I can't do much about it. It's just when it happens, it happens. I can go and, of course, take certain herbs and, you know, see a chi master, go to an acupuncturist to help me get through it faster, of course. You, as a human being, you still do all those things. But these are just part of the experience that you have as a human being. The worst pain ever, the kidney pains. I had gone through that how many times? Passing a kidney stone. And the witness, the empty self, watches it happen. And I've gone through this over and over and over again, passing a kidney stone. And then, you know, you do something about it. You try to get all the help you can and whatever, but you just pass the kidney stone because that's just part of the human experience.
Does the epic watcher like talk shit while he's watching you? So like,
what would he say exactly, Nathan? What's your idea of this?
It's just like,
see if you can mimic the voice.
It's like, get up, man. You're not that tired.
F up, get up. You can do it. No, it's a silent witness. It doesn't say anything, doesn't speak. It doesn't do any of those things. It just when I say watch, it's really the wrong term, but it experiences. But it experiences things from a neutral standpoint. So what I'm saying is that your center of gravity changes. Your center of gravity gets to the point where it becomes more neutral as you experience life as it passes by. Yeah. What's your next question, Michael? Nathan's going to cut in at some point anyway, so just be ready for it.
So like normally, like something happens and I can remember it. So I can remember like what I had for dinner last night, right?
Yeah.
But I can't remember what I had for dinner a year ago. But like God doesn't exist if you exist outside of time, then you don't forget stuff, right? Because it's just all right there.
And
so
also
you don't
also not right there.
You don't have memory, right? What do you mean?
Because remember, it's non-dual. So everything that is happening is also not happening simultaneously. You always have to include the opposite in any experience that you're speaking of, if you're talking about the presence of God.
So is that like transrational concept? Is that like why God exists? Because like it has to exist and not exist simultaneously? Or
the best way to look at that is, how do I word this? Because you're right in what you're saying. It's just a matter of that's what existence is. That's the tricky
existing
part.
And not existing.
Yeah, that's what
existing is part of
existing is.
Existing is part of not existing.
Yeah. Right. But again, these two things go together. They mesh. They collapse each other. And whatever that thing is when they collapse each other, that's what existence is. Existence, non-existence. I just don't have a word for it. Trans-existence, I don't know what to call that. But when the two collapse, that's what reality actually is, the ultimate reality. That's probably the best way to say it, because the ultimate reality includes existence, non-existence.
You want a word for it? You gotta go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I got to do what?
Huh? Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say something stupid. No, that's
yeah. I ruined the timing for you. Sorry, buddy. Save it for the next run.
I was gonna say, if you want a word for it, go to the woke people. They probably have a word for it. So probably make up a word. I'm just saying. Like,
go to the woke
so
people.
Creative.
Yeah.
So go to the woke,
and they'll come up with a word for it. Right?
Answers.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Even though the word that they come up with probably won't represent this ultimate reality, this existence / non-existence experience. Hence why I call it nothingness. Right. But when you look at nothing,
sorry, Michael, you had a question? My bad.
No, that's okay. Like, remember, it's all going to be whatever. But when we say nothingness, nothingness also means nothingness. It's no thing. So when you say no thing, it doesn't mean like there's nothing. It just means that it's no thing. It's not a thing. Right? It's not an objective. It's not a subjective. It's a no thing. It has no shape, no form. It's no thing, but it's there. It's a presence. It's existing or non-existing, but it's a no thing. And so that's another way you can look at nothingness, nothingness.
So in some sense, the atheists are right. God doesn't exist.
They're both right.
It doesn't exist and does exist.
Yeah, the theists and the atheists are right.
Yeah.
Right. They just don't know it. They just have a belief.
Right. So like in one of the videos, you talked about how, well, at the higher levels of awakening, then you start to just accept like all of the bad stuff as part of duality, right? So there's some suffering in the world, there's some happiness and love in the world, whatever. It's all part of this duality. And so you're like, well, it's just, you accept it because it's part of how you created it, right?
Yeah,
it's
but
part of you.
When I say accept it, I'm not saying, oh, suffering's happening in this third world country. It's what I don't really mean like that, but it's
no, I didn't take it like that.
Yeah, but some people do. Some people take it that way. Some people get at me and they get upset, especially some women. They get really upset. So you don't get so caught up in your emotions. Just taking what I'm saying here. But people get caught up in their stuff. It's just like, so what does it mean? And it's like, relax. You got to relax. All I'm saying is, everything is happening. Everything imperfect is happening perfectly, and you learn to accept.
I interpreted it.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's just an inevitable consequence of duality, right?
Yeah. Right. And these are the things that just happen. They happen because it's all coming out of the manifestation of all that is. Because again, God is playing the opposite of itself. So if God is playing the opposite of itself, you have to have suffering. And everyone that suffers, you have to remember too, and people all have them. I'm not really saying this to you directly, Michael, but when people suffer, you have to remember God is playing the role of suffering. God is the actor who's playing the role of suffering. So when the person, quote unquote, dies or whatever, they go back to this nothingness of all that there is. And it's like, oh gosh, I was acting the whole time. Damn, that was fun. Because from that standpoint, it is fun, if you quote unquote. So it's like, oh, you know what? Let me do this again. Because remember, you got to look at it from the standpoint of God. God is eternal. It's infinite. It can't die. Right? It's immortal. It can't die. Nothing can touch it. So if you know that you are this non-dual presence that's all eternal, endless, infinite, immortal, if you want to use that as a term, because it's beyond life and death. Nothing can touch it in any way. But it can have the experience of suffering and going through all this, whatever human experience that it's going through, knowing at the end when it dies, it comes back to its immortal, infinite, eternal self. Right? From that standpoint, so most human beings can't see from that standpoint. So it's like, why would God let this happen? Because, well, God is allowing that to happen to itself. Right? Playing the role of whoever is, quote unquote, having pleasure or going through suffering. Because when it dies, it goes right back to its non-dual itself. So it's not that God is being ungrateful or being selfish or being heartless. You got to remember, God's the one who's playing the roles. It's doing it to itself. It's tricking itself in believing that it's a human being who is suffering and who is dying. So it's not like we have no heart for people who are suffering and dying. We feel probably more than the average human being, the pain, the empathy and the compassion for those who are suffering. But at the same time, if you know that you're God, you know that you're the one that's doing it.
So my question is really, is there a choice, like in terms of creating a universe that is dual, that has duality or not? So are there other universe structures to explore that are not duality, that are something like people that live in duality can't comprehend this because they only understand, if you live in duality, you can only understand duality, but there's some other structure potentially, right? Or is there?
Yeah. So in the sense, I think there's two questions there. Is there a choice from the ultimate level? No, there is no choice. Choice is part of the experience that we're having. So choice is part of Maya. Maya meaning illusion. Everything that is happening is not what it appears to be, which also includes choice. So we have the experience of experiencing choice, of us making choices. But from the ultimate level, the only thing that has a choice is ultimate being, is ultimate presence. It's making the choice of creating all this in existence, and then when everything happens in existence, things take place where it has choice, it makes choices and does all that type of stuff to reach a certain goal. But all that stuff has already been, if you want to put time into the equation, it's all been planned out. If you want to look at it that way, it's not what it actually is, but it's the best I can do in the moment. But it's all planned out, just like how we have a video game. The video game is designed by someone, and then you get to make choices within the video game you're playing. It's kind of like that in a sense, but on a much more complex level. And now in regards to the duality that we're living in this world, are there other dualities that are less dual? And the answer is yes. So there are ultimate realities, like, you know, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, and all the sub-dimensions in between those. And there are less dual than the reality that we're living. So duality is a spectrum, which is something that's really, really very, very, very dual, all the way up to where you get to non-dual. So there are different spectrums of that. There's many different slices within the spectrum from hardcore duality all the way up to non-duality. So you can have an experience where it's not non-duality, but it's more non-dual than the experience that you're having right now. So that is true, yes.
And the whole universe is structured like that universe.
Well, within those dimensions, but any universe within a quote unquote third dimension, they're all dual. All right, so all of those are dual, but universes don't just have a dense third dimensional reality. They also have fourth dimension and fifth dimension and all that stuff, and those get non-dual within those realities. And of course, you can experience those type of realities when you change your state of consciousness. And the less dual something is, the closer you are to what is actually real, quote unquote. This is real. Even though in Advaita Vedanta, it's told that this is not real. That's one school of Vedanta. There's other schools of Vedanta that says this is real. And I agree with them too, because at the ultimate level of the Nondual Suchness, all those philosophies are true, just from different standpoints. So yes, this reality is illusion. That is true. At the same time, this reality is not an illusion. That is also true. All those things have to be included within the state of non-dual suchness. You don't exclude one over the other. They're all included. They're all true from a different perspective, from different perspectives. That's why it's very hard to hang with certain people who think that way, because you'd be like, pick a side. Come on, you can't. No, but in this non-dual suchness, all these things are true. You may pick a side just for the sake of being human and to be social, but inside you know that the other perspectives are also true as well. It's a lot to take in. That's why some people go insane when they have such an experience, because their ego can't hold that. But my ego can hold that. I've worked on this for a long time, so I can hold it.
That's kind of why I was asking about like what is the point of enlightenment or having multiple awakenings?
Oh, I never answered that. Gosh.
Because I'm like, I have a mortgage, you know? Yeah. I don't want to be home. I don't want to be homeless. I understand.
But who said you'd be homeless if you experienced enlightenment? Whoever said you'd be homeless? That happens to some people. It doesn't happen to everyone.
Well, it may be completely irrational. It's some fear, something, right? Of like, okay, this is still part of my attachment. I need to pay my mortgage. I need to be able to buy dinner, whatever.
Yeah.
So like if I went around with my head twitching and all this stuff that you're talking about, like I think people would think I'd lost my mind.
People didn't see me twitch. People didn't see me twitch. Kundalini knows when to twitch.
Oh yeah.
When there's nobody around, Kundalini will twitch, but it doesn't do that in front of people unless if I chose to show someone what's happening, I could do that. But no, it's not like I'm having whatever and I can't control it. Oh shit, I gotta run to the bathroom.
It'd be funny if you went to like a dance club.
I had the
oh, sorry, my bad. Sorry, go on.
Your bit. It's okay, buddy.
It's all good. Go on, Michael. It's all good.
Yeah, he can't do it now. That's the comic rule. He can't go now. His timing is gone. He's got to wait for the next.
I already messed up. Yeah, I'm sorry for messing up your timing, Nathan.
No, it's all good.
You won't be the first. Every time he goes to the comedy club, someone interrupts. He's like, "Man, I'm trying to do that bit. You just ruined it." All right, it happens. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
It's all good.
Well, I'm not trying to be cynical because, like, I think everything that you shared was incredible, and like, I have huge appreciation for life and everything here. Part of me is just like, well, I am here for whatever reason. I should just make the most of this experience.
Sure.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if like enlightenment has to be part of it. So like, there's this concept of samsara, right? And this idea that like you need to meditate enough to reach a level of enlightenment that you can escape samsara, right?
Well,
but like,
it depends on the individual. Not everyone has to do that. Some people have reached. Putting in that work.
I like to go out and look at the stars. I like to go out and look at the stars. I'm like,
yeah, but so do I.
I don't dislike it that much here. I'm not like I have to escape this. This sucks. I don't want to come back here. Well, I'd be bored. I'd come back again.
No, I'm with you. I like what's going on here.
Yeah, it's fine with me. So
yeah.
I mean, not that I have certainly like plenty of suffering in my life. Like overall, I think it's great.
Yeah, but here's the thing though. That goes away with enlightenment though. People don't get enlightened and say, I gotta escape this. When you have that awakening and it sticks, you embrace it. Some people prior to enlightenment, they're trying to escape all that. When you become enlightened, you embrace it. You still look up into the stars, you still enjoy the stars, you still enjoy if it's steak is what you eat. Because there's a lot of enlightened beings, they still eat steak. Right? And they enjoy the steak. All right. These are not things that you have to give up. These aren't rules that these things have to happen. They're different for different people. Enlightened beings will still have arguments, will still fight with their wives and do whatever. Those things don't necessarily change. People think they do because people have this ideal of what enlightenment is, and that's not what it is. Enlightenment is when your relative self can comprehend what you actually are. Right? When you become enlightened doesn't mean you become a saint, right? There's a group of people that become that. That's those group of, that is for those group of people. But that's not enlightenment has so many different ranges, right? Enlightenment is when you comprehend and realize who you actually are, right? But those things do change for some people in different ways. But there's a whole spectrum. That's why we had that segment. Flavors of enlightenment. There are many different flavors to this.
That's when you realize that you're a chicken and you came out of the egg.
That's a dual experience of me having an experience of being a chicken coming out of an egg. That's not enlightenment. That's not a spiritual awakening. That's a peak experience. Right. So that's one out of many experiences, but that's not an enlightenment experience. That's ultra states of consciousness, peak experience, that type of thing. But it has nothing to do with spiritual awakening in that sense. No.
Okay.
Now, if you have the experience of being a chicken and all chickens and all hens and all eagles and all alligators and all tigers and all blade of grass and all grain of sand and all speck of dust and all stardust and all stars and all planets and all universes and all galaxies and all multiverses and alternate universes, all that, and then the flip side, none of those things are happening, you're having an enlightenment experience. You're having an awakening when you realize that you're all that. Not experiencing that, but realizing that you're all that. Because you can have experience of non-duality and you're not You can have the experience of non-duality, but you're not realizing, you haven't come to the realization of non-duality. Those are two different things. Right. So when one has the realization of what they are is non-dual suchness, or beyond non-dual suchness, because it doesn't stop at non-duality, it goes even beyond that. You're now having an awakening. I just want to say, Michael, this is a great episode. Like, I'm going to have fun editing this episode. This is really, really good. Like, I appreciate you for having these questions. This is like a really good episode.
Oh, well, I really appreciate you talking with me. Okay, well, one last question.
Please, if you have 3 more, like, go for it, man. You have
No. I've been up since 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
I can
cool.
only go a little bit more.
Yeah.
I've been at work on Zoom calls the whole day, and then
Well, I feel you.
It's kind of funny. This is a lot more fun though. So like, some scientists talk about this, or this has become like a more popular topic over the past couple of decades, I guess, like this idea of emergence and complexity.
Okay.
And so this is basically this idea that you can produce extremely complex things in nature, either in terms of structures or in terms of behavior, from like relatively simple principles.
Okay.
So like one example is the way neurons are laid out in your brain,
Mm-hmm.
where the brain has too many neurons and too many connections. You couldn't like map that out and code it in DNA and then just like follow the map and lay everything out, because like there's not enough information in DNA. It's too complicated. So they're like simple rules that the cells are follow. Okay, if you're this type of cell, like go wander around until you find another cell like you, and then like line up next to them and then shoot out connection in a random direction or something like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, that's the best example I can think of right now. But basically, there's a lot of stuff in the universe that appears, there's a lot of complexity that appears the result of like relatively simple principles. So like, even something like the way elements are created through fusion in stars and things, there's certain simplicity and elegance to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I don't know where my question is basically trying to get at, is this kind of a fun way for God to like set things up and just set up some initial conditions and then like watch what happens if you don't touch anything? And is it like a toy to play with where you're figuring out what happens, where you experiment with certain rules? Or like, I mean, maybe it's a dumb question because all this is happening outside of time, but sorry, I don't think I asked this question in a very good way.
I think I understand.
But basically, I'm trying to get at the idea that like, is the universe like God experimenting with these simple rules and then just like watching what happens and being like, wow, that was interesting. Maybe I'll try again with some other.
Yes and no. God is doing that and more, right? But the ultimate level, God is not doing anything because there's no time and space. But within all that, there's aspects of God where there's an aspect of God that is curious and is doing this weird experiment to see where it leads. All of those things are true. But at the ultimate level, nothing is happening. Everything that's happening in the universe is a result of nothing happening. So if you want to know, remember you asked the question earlier, is this a manifestation of nothing? I believe that was what you asked, if I'm correct. And the answer is yes. But this is a result of nothing happening. You're experiencing nothing happening. This is what happens when absolutely nothing happens. This is the result. It gets really tricky on that because how do you comprehend that? So if nothing is absolutely nothing happening, right? Keep in mind, no human being outside of the enlightenment state has ever experienced absolutely nothing, right? But I can say with confidence that if you experience absolutely nothing, this is the result. So all this stuff that you just asked, God is doing that too, right? But at the ultimate level, God is nothing, nothingness, allowing all this stuff to happen within what it's also creating and also being time and space. Because God is not just creating time and space, God is also time and space. But it's also beyond time and space. So all those things are happening. There's a version of God that doesn't know what's going to happen next because it's choosing to be a slave of time and space, right? But as time and space, there's nothing for God to not know or to know because it's time and space itself. But remember, everything is God. So as you go into from the non-dual to the causal to the subtle down to the gross, God is experiencing what God does at that level of being all the way down to the gross body or to the gross substance, which you can call matter.
God is a tiramisu cake.
And more.
But I mean, there's like all these layers that are all the cake, that are all very different.
Yeah. Or God is the Russian dolls.
Maybe a 7-layer dip.
7-layer dip. Right? But not only is God is the cake, but God is the atmosphere that's holding the cake together. God is the table that the cake is on, or in the plate that the cake is on. God is the plate that's on the table. God is the legs of the table. God is the floor that holds up the table. God is the walls that shields the table and the food on the table. God is all those things. This is where it gets tricky. So it's not just the layered cake. This is so much to take in. This is so much to take in. A human being cannot comprehend that unless they're in that moment of non-dual suchness.
Unless you make a cake. I don't know. I want a cake.
Even if you make a cake, you just have an analogy, right?
I want a cake,
right? And God is that too. God is having the experience of the cake being eaten, not only being eaten, but being admired and and having the anticipation of eating it. God is playing the role of all of that, and it does that with ease. That's why I'm so blown away by what God actually does, because it's a direct experience where I'm so blown away by that. So I'm not looking at it as a concept. I'm looking at it as an actual thing that I experienced, where I can come back and report saying that God is doing these things. And if I talk about this long enough, I'll start bawling my eyes out. I had to go through that for a period of time of just crying. Every time I spoke about it, I just tear up and just start crying because it's so so overwhelming. Like to have the experience where you see what God is actually doing. I can't find the words. I can't find the words to describe this, man. Like when you realize that you're the actual universe, like I want people to understand how small our solar system is in comparison to the whole entire universe. It's smaller than a grain of grass in comparison. If you compared yourself on a beach, and you were just one grain of sand, our solar system is even smaller than that in comparison to the whole entire universe, right? And you or me, who's sitting in that planet of that tiny bitty galaxy, right? Who's having that experience, has the experience of the whole entire beach. The whole entire thing. So that when you come back to your itty bitty self and try to tell other itty bitty people about what just happened, they're just looking at you like, I can't even. But there's a few people that'll be like, I'm curious. I'm wondering what that's all about. You know what I mean? There's that's going on, of course, right? But everybody else is like, right? That's why an experience like that is so magnificent. It's so sublime. It's so everything, that when you have that experience of being the entire universe, not even just this universe, others. Like there really is a megaverse, and you're all of that simultaneously, all crushed into this thing, which it collapsed into this thing called nothing, because you realize that you can see that you are the cause of it as well, at the causal level anyway, right? And then at the higher level, the non-dual suchness level, or the absolute monism level, you realize that there is no causality. There is none of that. It's just is. It's always been doing that. We're just experiencing time passing through. But from that standpoint, time isn't passing through. Time, like what we were saying earlier, is just a static thing. It's just happening. It's absolutely mind-blowing, right? And you come back, and in that sense, from the ego standpoint, you're forever changed from that experience. But it's not a change that everything about you changes and people can't recognize you. All that stuff still happens, and you still come back in your regular body, and most people won't even notice unless you spoke about it. But there's some things they may notice because certain things about you have changed, right? So like, and I can go on for days of things that has changed, of things that I no longer do, or ways that I no longer think. Like before this, I was a stand-up comedian, as Nathan knows. I was a stand-up comedian for years, right? That's what I did. I told jokes for a living, you know, done TV shows and won awards, and that was my life. All that changed. That didn't change at the awakening. That started changing 2 years into my meditation. 3 years after that, I had the first awakening. Right. So a lot changed even prior to the awakening. But after the awakening happening, all these other things start to happen. Right. But I got into nonprofit because my thoughts changed. I couldn't no longer like go up on stage and do what I used to do. I can still do it, but I wouldn't know what to talk about at this point, because all I want to talk about is this stuff. I don't want to talk about going at the party and hanging out with whatever. I don't really want to do that, right? So those type of things change. Your perspective change. You get to the point, well, at least I got to the point where I can listen to anyone's point of view and agree with your point of view, even if no matter how drastic it is. I can agree with it because I can see that standpoint, because that standpoint is included in what I'm speaking of, because it includes everything. My relative self may choose a side, but at this point, I choose to choose a side. I'm not forced to do it because of culture or because of belief systems or anything like that. I'm choosing that side because I guess the relative self has to choose some kind of side, right? So I prefer to be liberal. That's just me. But I see that I totally see the conservative side too. Right? I see the left-wing side, the right-wing side. I see all that. I can sit in the room with a bunch of clan members and reason with them, no problem. Doesn't mean I like them. It doesn't mean whatever, yeah, but I can sit and reason with them, and I've done this with people, right? I sit side by side with attempted murderers. I did this today, right? I had to work with a guy who's convicted. He's not convicted yet. He's on trial for attempted murder. I went and met with him for an hour, no judgment. We meditated for a half hour out of that hour. All right, I can only do that work by letting go of those things that I couldn't let go before. These things start to change. Right? I don't see that person any different than the church minister who's doing the great good for the community. I see them both as the same thing, just in different bodies, different circumstances that led to different results. But I see the same empty witness that's behind them both. The same empty witness that's behind the clan member, the same empty witness that's behind the saints. Same stuff. Different body, different gender, different culture, different circumstances, different experiences. It's the reality that the average person can't accept, because they see enlightenment. Their definition of enlightenment is perfection. That's not what enlightenment is. Everything is perfect, right? And you come to realize that everything is perfect. That's true in the moment of enlightenment. But it doesn't mean that because you attain enlightenment, but you're not really attaining. There's nothing to attain. You're already that. You just come to the realization that you're that. But when you come to that realization, it doesn't mean that you start doing everything perfectly. That's not how it works. Even though everything that's manifesting out of non-dual suchness is happening perfectly, if you understand what I'm saying, right? But it doesn't mean that you as a human being, as an individual start doing perfect things. That doesn't work that way. It doesn't mean that when you become enlightened, now you can do all forms of mathematics. That's not true. It doesn't mean that you know all biology and chemistry and psychology. That's not true. None of those things you probably ever know. But what you come to know is what you actually are, that's creating everything into existence. Some things do improve. Some things you do get better at. Some people who become enlightened have this enormous field of charisma, but not all enlightened beings do. Some enlightened beings come up with, end up having cities, supernatural abilities. Some other enlightened beings don't have any of those things. They come in all different shapes and sizes and different abilities and all that. Some things get enhanced and some things get reduced. The point is, if you become that, what contribution are you making to the world? And everyone's making the contribution to the world. It's just the enlightened being is aware that he or she is doing that. So this stuff gets really, really tricky. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like comedy. It's kind of like comedians, right? There's people in the audience and they're saying, you know, that guy's funny or that guy's not funny. My thing is, if the guy is on stage and he's making a living off of it, or he's making people laugh, that person is funny. I may not think that person is funny subjectively, but that doesn't take away from that person being funny or not. The person is funny. They're doing their job. They make people laugh.
Everybody has treats people like they're actors in their play.
Yeah. Everyone's treating people like they're actors in their play. Yeah. And also the background performers too. Because some people are just background, like Nathan is a background performer to me.
Word. I thought it was I thought
like, Michael, you're the actor and he's the background performer. So I give you all the attention and none to Nathan whatsoever.
You know what I thought? I thought you were Conan O'Brien. I was Andy, and he and Michael was the guest. All right, it's all good. All right, whatever. I'm just a background character.
You see what the eagle does, though? It's like I'm making them a background performer. Right? That's what we do, right? Because everything revolves around us. But at the moment of enlightenment, you realize that all that goes away temporarily, where you realize that everything is just this one thing. You don't come out saying, I just attained enlightenment. It's not how it works. You realize that everything has attained enlightenment at the non-dual suchness level, right? It's so friggin' awesome. It's so amazing. It's so everything. There's no experience that compares to that. None. And I had a friend who got mad at me when she asked me, was it better than the experience? Was it better than the birth of your children? And I said, yes. And she goes, I can't believe you say such a thing. I'm like, you asked me a question, I'm being honest with my answer. Right? I'm not going to lie about that. Right? So you can get upset all you want about my answer, but you asked me a question, I answered your question. Right? It's the most ultimate experience. There's nothing that compares to that. Socially is the wrong thing to say. Right? But that's not the truth.
Right.
All right. So yeah. So when you're talking to women, if you have the experience and the woman asks you, was it better than the birth of your kids? Just say no.
Say yes. Say yes.
For your good. But yeah, but I'm saying no. It was better, way better than that. Whatever. Actually, I was traumatized at watching the birth of my children. That was the most gross thing I've ever experienced in my life. But that turned me off from sex for a good 6 months. Yeah.
Blood everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Everything. Gunk, blood, cutting the umbilical cord. Oh my God. Oh.
I hope this makes the cut.
Don't get me started.
I hope this makes the cut.
But the beauty that comes out of that's not making the cut. This is getting cut, right? But the beauty of what comes out of that.
You're gonna have to watch what you talk about on Nathan's podcast.
I know, huh? If he even has me on there, because I'd probably be the janitor in his podcast. As I'm sweeping for, what is that, Nathan? Shut up there. Keep sweeping.
Miss a spot.
You missed a spot, buddy.